Hi class, welcome to week 7, our second last week, penultimate week I guess, in this semester. This week we are moving beyond the business messages that you guys wrote. I did a fantastic job on, by the way, so I haven't got your grades to you. I'm going to work on getting that this week. I was really impressed in how thoughtful you guys were in applying kind of what I'm bringing to the table, which is rhetorical perspective, rhetorical triangle, and kind of getting you guys to think about audience. And you guys have really gone through the steps in a way that I think is productive. So I hope it's productive for you. And my guess is that it was based upon skimming through each message. So I was very impressed with that. Very impressed with your writing capability. Obviously, you guys are very experienced. You guys have lots of workplace experience, lots of academic experience in terms of writing. And you guys are just very savvy at kind of understanding kind of what I'm putting down. So just want to say that. Um, Next week is things left uncovered. So the vast majority of you completed the one question survey. I think actually all of you completed the one question survey that asked you what you would like covered in week 8. And I got feedback on that. And I have chosen a few things. So next week is going to kind of be a hodgepodge thing. It's going to kind of be a Q&A type thing where the video is probably going to be a bit longer. I'm going to answer all your questions. And I actually have a little mini assignment for week 8 based upon what the most common thing that you guys said was. So I'll leave that for next week. This week you are doing your resumes, cover letters, or application letters, as Beauvais and Phil call it. So this project I teach in essentially all my classes because, well, one of two reasons. One, I think it's very important that after writing class or after kind of learning about writing that you're able to then kind of apply it to a situation that's extremely practical and self-beneficial as well. And two, I think two, the second reason is they are technical writing documents or professional writing documents under the guise of kind of what my field is, because they are workplace documents and you can format them, and they are documents that essentially operate as a linkage between an employee and a potential employer. And three, because regardless of what level you're at, whether you're a freshman coming in or an MBA student who's already had 3 or 4 jobs, I think it's always important to kind of go over what's a good resume, what's a good cover letter, because even if you are pretty safe and secure in your job, maybe you've been there for 10 or 12 years, I mean, you just kind of never know what's going to happen. So it is good. It is good to know that and to kind of know what contemporary resumes look like now, because I think of all the documents, memos, reports, all the documents that Beauvais and Thiel talks about. The one that changed the most, I think, over the last few decades has been resumes and cover letters. Now, I myself have only been around for a few decades, but just looking historically back at journal articles from the 70s and the 80s and even the early 90s about what constituted a good resume, some of the basic principles are still there, but it's kind of changed in terms of technology. So that's what you guys are doing this week. You guys are writing a cover letter and a resume. So chapters 13 and 14. So the way I like to do it is I want you to actually choose a job ad that would be feasible for you to, or that is soliciting applications for a job that you would feasibly or viably be qualified for. So don't choose to be something that your educational experience hasn't prepared you for, because I want you to kind of go through the exercises about what this would be like if you were to apply for a job next week. So it kind of begins with the story of you, in that there's 6 tasks for this week. The 2 big ones are the resume and the cover letter. The 4 ones are just kind of small little exercises, and some of them don't even need responding. You're just kind of thinking through the questions. So from thinking about you, your narrative, your trajectory, all the way up to creating a LinkedIn profile with your resume on it. That's kind of what this week-long assignment is taking you through. And if you've done this a million times, it's fine. Go through the assignment anyway and see if maybe you learned something new, or think about resumes and cover letters or document design in a way that you haven't yet. So the one thing that Beauvais and Thiel talk about is we are people, right? We are. They do talk about that. Not enough. And we all have our narratives. We all have our trajectories, right? And some of our trajectories are pretty circuitous and meandering and unexpected. And we might think that our job histories are scattered or dappled or inconsistent, right? You have big gaps, or you shifted from one industry to the other like within a month. You're kind of worried about what that might look like to a prospective employer or potential employer. So it rather than leave that up to them to figure out or to make assumptions or judgments on you, it's good that you think about what your narrative is. And even if it might seem scattered, if you went to, if you're art history major first and then you ended up in sociology and then you ended up business or whatever your trajectory is, or you've been business right away since, high school, you're involved in it since then or right from freshman year, regardless of your trajectory, think about that. Think about the narrative in the trajectory of your employment history in your life. Because the more you know about that, the easier it's going to be for you to craft cover letters and resumes, because these aren't just some banal workplace documents. These are someone's first impression of you and someone who has the power to either provide you a salary and benefits that'll support your family or yourself for the rest of your life or reject you. So if you think about that power dynamic, we should think very deeply about these documents and the psychology behind why certain applicants get picked and why not. Obviously, there are varying statistics out there, but anywhere to 70 to 85% of the jobs you get, you have a pre-existing relationship with someone in that organization. So networking is very important, but this is not a class of networking and it's asynchronous, so it's tough. But what we can do is at least make sure that your cover letter and resume are designed in such a way that gives you the best opportunity to get a foot in the door and to get that interview. Because once you get that interview, then you can show off yourself and speak in person. Because that's all we're fighting for here, right? Is a shot to meet them in person. That's all it is. You're not going to get a job on your resume. So what you want your resume and cover letter to do is to pique their interest enough and to get their attention enough and to impress them enough that they want to see you. They want to meet you. And I'm not familiar with MBA program in terms of the other courses you take on employment or even some upper level undergraduate courses that you might take in finance or accounting, how much you guys think about this, but we're talking about this. I'm sure you guys are all drilled that jobs are important. Obviously, you guys are in an MBA program, but how do people get jobs? Through effective writing, right? So we all know that once we get to the organization, it's very important to have good writing, but how can writing be used to facilitate and build that relationship between a seeming stranger, someone who is on a 2-page PDF document, to a nice job? How does writing work in that? And that's what Bo Vance will talk about in chapter 13, 14. And that's what I want to get you guys to think about for this week. So I ask a lot of questions in the worksheet. I get you to think about document design, word choice. So I have you do a variety of things. So you'll see all the 6 tasks. I'm not going to run them down in this video, but find a job ad, analyze the job ad, almost as a literary text. When I do this in class, we conduct a literary analysis of the text in a way that you would with Shakespeare or Faulkner or a poem or whatever it is. You're analyzing the discourse, you're analyzing the words to try to find hints of the meaning of what they're trying to get at, because job ads can be kind of cryptic. Job ads can be... I've been a part of teams here at Old Dominion where we're writing job ads, and if we have a gap, let's say someone left and we have to fill that gap, we're creating our ideal candidate. So we say you have to have a PhD in rhetoric, you have to have good communication skills, obviously, you have to have background in grant writing, online teaching, and we list all these things. And there's really no way that someone would have 100% of the characteristics that we're outlining, right? So in a way, the job ad is not real in the sense that it's crafting an ideal candidate for who they want. So your job is to discern what that ideal candidate is and try and create your documents in a way that fits within the organization. Because we all know that, I haven't got jobs that people less qualified than me have got, and I got jobs that people more qualified than me that didn't get. For example, when I got hired here in ODU, I talked to some other people that I knew at my former school who also applied to the position, who were more qualified for me, had more publications than I did, and I got it. And vice versa. And I've been rejected from places where I'm like, wait, what? And how did that happen? There's this kind of weird, and if I'm sure, I think some of you have served on, I'm sure some HR panels or job committee panels where you've been in charge of hiring, or at least with interns or with other employees. There's a very subjective process. It's not as objective as we like to think. It's not just, okay, I got this volunteer and this 4.0 and this blah, blah, blah. It's not as objective as we like to think. There's a lot more subjectivity there. And then where there's subjectivity, that's where rhetoric can work. That's where persuasion can work. That's where writing works, is in those softer areas. So I want you guys to take advantage of that. So I go through ways that you can do that, which is research the organizations, identify their values, identify current projects or things that they're known for, and mention them in your cover letter or make sure that the skills that they outline in the job ad are also on your resume, so there's a discursive overlap, right? If you think about Venn diagrams, I had this chalkboard behind me for 2 months and I haven't used it yet. I could have drawn a Venn diagram up there. If you see a Venn diagram of you and the organization, you want to make sure that they overlap as much as possible so that you can argue yourself as someone who can fit. Because ultimately, they're going to be working with you for the next 5, 10, 20 years of their lives. They know you're smart. You have an MBA. They know you're capable. They know you're motivated. You have an MBA. What sets you apart, right? What's going to get it? What's going to allow you to get that position? And I think putting a resume and a cover letter, they're very impressive, and that shows that you've researched organizations and understand what they value, and that you just didn't, scattershot 60 across Hampton Roads and just kind of hope for the best, but you actually thought about the organization and how you can contribute to that organization. That goes a long way. That goes a long, long way. I know when I've also been on job search committees here in terms of hiring. Obviously, we wrote the ad and then we had to hire them. And the applicants that always impressed me the most were those that went on Old Dominion website. God have mercy on their soul for being on Old Dominion's website. Some of those spaces can get pretty shoddy. But they went on the website, they researched the program, they researched our PhD program, they researched our master's, undergrad, all that stuff. They learned about our history, they learned about some courses that we offer that are pretty well known. And they took the time, probably about an hour, most likely hour and a half, took the time, got to know the school, and then wrote a cover letter that talked about what they could bring to us, right? Because you're not entitled to a job, right? You got a degree, and that's fine, but you're not entitled to a job. You kind of have to fight for it. So you have to show them why you deserve or how you can contribute to them, right? So you're not asking them to give you something, you're showing how you can give them something. And then ultimately that's how they give you something. But that's the power dynamic, right? And analyzing power dynamics is extremely important. So anyways, those are the ones that typically get interviews. Is why would we hire someone who hasn't taken the time to understand what we do at Old Dominion? Why would we hire someone who has shown no interest in our PhD program or no interest in our student body, get to know what the average student from Norfolk looks like? Like, why would we want someone like that at our organization? The same goes for non-academic context as well. Why would they want someone at the organization that you don't know what their recent project was, that you don't know what they're known for, their most well-known app or their most well-known product or the most well-known whatever it is that they've created? So I hope that makes sense. So that's a pretty lofty discussion about just kind of document design, which ultimately you're doing, just doing resume and cover letters. But it's a very thoughtful rhetorical process. So be careful about the words you're choosing. So the worksheet kind of takes you through. It begins with you thinking about yourself and then analyzing the organization. And then that kind of leads into, well, how can I craft myself as someone who fits within that organization? Because ultimately those kinds of cover letters are the ones that get interviews. So I think that's all I got to say for this week. Sorry for the bit lengthier video, but I feel very passionately about resumes and cover letters because it's strange to think that 2 pages, right? The 2-page PDF, and you should send them as PDFs because it's the same formatting. So regardless of what computer they open it, and then it's gonna do that if you email it. Or most systems have you upload PDFs anyway if you're applying through an online system. But so much of our lives, our salaries, our pensions, if we're gonna have any of those in the future for our generations, so much of what we get as people relies on these 2 documents, if you think about it. Obviously, there's the networking, and you should go to conferences and go to local things and make connections with businesses and maybe visit businesses. And there's a human element that we're not covering, and that is just normal that you have to do, right? You network, and even though it's very socially awkward, and you go up to people with sweaty hands and introduce yourselves, and it's scary for some. But ultimately, if you have a poor resume, if your resume is very gimmicky or your name is in really big letters in a distasteful type font, you're not going to get an interview. So it's kind of a lot of your future and a lot of your job prospects are kind of relying on these documents being very effective. I've known very smart people who have not crafted very effective cover letters. I knew a very smart person who just finished his dissertation at my old school in the University of South Florida. And I looked at his cover letter when he was applying to each school. What you have to do is you have to go to each university, look at each university, and you apply. And you typically apply to anywhere from 40 to 60 different schools when you graduate. And his cover letters were, they weren't that strong. they weren't showing an awareness of audience. They weren't showing an awareness of that institution. So he's very smart. Went to school for years. Knows his stuff, but he didn't get any jobs. And I think in large part because the cover letter wasn't really tailored. It didn't pique someone's interest to be like, oh, I want to meet that guy, or I want to have a conversation with that woman. It wasn't, it didn't do that. So that's another anecdote. Again, I can go on all day, and I probably shouldn't because I have to respect your time. So 15 minutes, long enough. So good luck writing those. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. I'm sure your resume and cover letter skills will blow me away again. So looking forward to that. And then week 8, we'll have a kind of hodgepodge. I'm going to answer all your questions, and it'll be a grand old time. So have a good week. Happy resume writing, and we'll talk to you later.